Hayley, thank you so much for joining the First Word. It's lovely to see you, and you've got such an amazing story to tell. So thank you for being here.
To be here and to share a positive surrogacy experience to the world.
So you had your two babies, and at the time they were 2 and 4. And I guess working as a midwife, you saw the tragedy around women not being able to conceive. So you thought it would be the best thing to be a surrogate, and you just followed that path, which is just phenomenal. So first of all, can you tell us about yourself and your family?
So my family consists of me and my husband, our 2 children. Our kids at the time that we gave birth to surrogate child was Lockie and Annie were 2 and 4. So they were quite small during that process, but they're now a little bit older. And yeah, we live in the Great Southern. At the time that we were going through surrogacy, we were living in Perth. So it was relatively easy to get through that process, because the process to get through to the point where you're ready to undergo fertility treatment to try and conceive, that process is quite lengthy and involved. So I had lots of appointments. So yeah, managed to get through that in probably about 9 months, I think. So from saying we'll do it to being ready to have an embryo transfer was probably about a year, I think.
From when you've decided that you wanted to be a surrogate, that process was 9 months. So what about choosing the family, or did they choose you, or how did that transpire?
So I didn't know anybody who needed a surrogate. So we were kind of in this tricky position of trying to find somebody who needed a surrogate. And I guess once you go into that world, you realize that there are a lot of women who need the help of somebody to carry a child. But it was just trying to find that person. So I had ideas in my mind of who I would like to carry a baby for. And I knew that it would be a heterosexual couple. I knew it would be for somebody who wouldn't be able to carry their own child themselves. Like, I didn't want to put myself at risk of her accidentally falling pregnant at the same time that I was pregnant. Yeah, and I kind of thought it would be somebody who perhaps had been through a cancer journey and had lost their fertility as a result of that. And as it turned out, that's exactly who I carried for. So it took a little while to find the people who were right for us. And we talked to a couple of families in other areas around Australia. And I think that ultimately we were like, it's just too hard to go interstate for us at that time. Just recognising we had a young family. My husband at the time was studying as well. But just, knew that we couldn't manage to carry for somebody from interstate. So we just, kept it local, and then, stumbled upon our, I'll call them friends now. So they were strangers to us at the time, and it was like a blind date. Like, I messaged her and said,
is this a Facebook group?
Yeah. So I was a part of a, so once I said I was going to do this, which was soon after we had our second child. So she was a little baby, and I'd said, like, I'm going to breastfeed her for at least a year, and then after that I'll explore surrogacy. And so then when I started exploring, I joined surrogacy groups with surrogates only, and just learned so much from them. And so then I put it out to the group and said, like, this is who I would like to find to carry a baby for. If anybody knows anybody. And as it turned out, our friends had recently been to chat with another surrogate, because they were entering the world of surrogacy, and were like, how do we ever find a surrogate? And so then that girl messaged me and said, hey, have you talked to these people? And I was like, no, I don't know them. Like, I haven't seen them in the communities yet, and the surrogacy communities. And so I just threw her a message and was like, hey, I'm Hayley. I'd be really keen to meet up with you and just hear more about you. And so we caught up for a lunch, and it was just like a first date. It was the weirdest
Just
thing.
you, or with your partner
Yeah,
and her partner?
just me and her.
Yeah.
And it felt right, I think. I walked
Yeah.
away from that and I was like, I think this could be okay. But I was also really aware that I couldn't just go in blindly with my own on my own. Like, I had to get my husband to meet them as
Mm.
well. And so the next step was to have we had a dinner date together. And it went really, really smoothly, and the boys got along really, really well. And that was
Mhm.
another very important thing to me. Like, I wanted to be sure that it wasn't just like it wasn't just something that we were
You
going to
too.
do and just move on from, like a business
Yeah.
transaction. Like, it needed to be authentic. It needed to be like it meant something.
Mm.
Like, our relationship had to be strong, because I didn't want to just go in and carry a baby for somebody and walk away and never have anything more to do with
Mm.
them. And so that the boys got along really easily without us girls having to be there to sort of, like, hold their
Yeah, yeah,
hands or
yeah.
launch
Mediate.
conversation. Yeah, it was really like natural right from the start. So yeah, we walked away from that, me and my husband, and I was like, do you reckon we could do this? And he was like, yeah, they'd be really nice to carry for. So we went from there.
It's so like wonderful, I guess, to hear your point of view, because I think I've only largely ever really heard of a couple looking for a surrogate. So I know a lot about what they're looking for, like what they would love to find in the person they chose to carry their baby. But of course, it's just as big a decision for you to find that right couple that fits and ticks all the boxes. So it's so nice that it came about so organically over lunch and then dinner. And then from that point, when you decided to make the first sort of medical, I guess, appointment, was there was there anything legal or like administrative you had to do, or was that just what happened there?
Well, I left that up to them to get that
Mm-hmm.
ball rolling. So I guess as a starting point, I went to see my doctor. I had to be approved to pursue surrogacy. So I went to see my GP and said, like, this is something I'd like to do. And they were like, yep, can't see a reason why not. So I was referred then to the fertility specialist that they were working with. In order to get approved for surrogacy, you have to do a number of things, which then creates a submission to the Reproductive Technology Council. And I'll say, like, this was 7 years ago, so things could have changed. So I'm sorry if I say something that's not current, but at the time, so we had to see the fertility specialist, get approved by them. And there was no reason why I wouldn't be approved. Like, I'd had beautiful natural pregnancies, conceived easily, normal pregnancies, beautiful births. So I was pretty straightforward in that respect. We then had to have counselling. So me and my husband separately, them separately, and then all of us together. We had to see a psychologist. So, and me and my husband had to have, what's the test? Like a really, really thorough
Compatibility?
test,
Yeah.
personality test,
Right.
like 500 multiple choice questions.
Oh,
And so
it's
then that
off.
goes back to the psychologist. They had to do that as well. And then we all meet together to show what our personality types are, to say, like, yeah, you guys
Yeah.
look like you're a good team. And then lawyers as well. So me and my husband had to speak with a lawyer. They had to speak to a lawyer. And then we all met together to ensure everybody was aware of what the legalities were surrounding surrogacy. And then that gets filed and submitted to the RTC. And then we wait for them to say, yep, you're approved. But then once you're approved, we then had to wait 3 months as a cooling off period. So if we
A
decided
cooling off period.
if we decided in that time, actually, no, we don't want to do this, feels too much, then we could have.
Okay.
But by that time, it was like, come on, hurry up, let's go. We've done lots of work to this point. So yeah, then we were ready to go.
So that 3-month cooling off period, is that mandatory to just ensure that you process all of the information, both parties, and then if someone had a sort of a moment of freak out, they had the opportunity to sort of pull away? And then whilst that process is going on, is there, so when did the transfer happen after that 9 month?
Yeah. Yep. So once we had that cooling off period, I think like we had in our minds prepared for when we might be ready for an embryo transfer. And so we were just working towards that. But in that 9 month period, like these guys were strangers to us. So we spent so much time just getting to know each other, really creating that beautiful foundation for what was to come. So yeah, it was really nice. Like I got to meet their families, like we just got to know each other, which was really, really important because we were then about to embark on a massive journey together. So we were ready for an embryo transfer, and then had an embryo transfer. That was an experience.
And then what then? So the embryo transfer, and then what happened?
Oh, so I hadn't gone through fertility treatment before, so that was a whole new world to me. Embryo transfer, that 2-week waiting to find out whether or not we were pregnant. It was just a real
I hope not.
You can edit that out. It was lots of questioning, like, am I pregnant? What is that little twinge that I'm feeling down here? Oh my God, is my period coming? Like, am I premenstrual or am I hormonal? Like, we did a full medicated cycle, so it was lots of hormones. I think I tolerated it pretty well, I think. And at the 2-week wait, after the 2-week wait, I had to go and have my bloods done at the clinic, and they called back and said, yeah, you're pregnant. And because I'm the patient, so all of that information comes to me first. And then I think they then, with my consent, called our friends to say, I actually don't remember what happened, but at the time I was in the city and my friend was in the city too. So I was like, hey, do you want to catch up? And so I called up and was like, we're pregnant.
Oh, I get shivers thinking at that moment. Was she just, she would have just been absolutely, the world would have shifted for her at that point.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. It's just joy, total joy after, like the possibility of not being able to carry or to ever be a parent, to then be given this hope was, it's just amazing.
And just going back a step, so you said there were hormones as a part of the transfer. Why did you have to have the hormones?
It's a good question. Not all surrogates will have a medicated cycle. And this is something that we discussed a lot with the fertility specialists. So the ones that we were seeing were like, this is the gold standard. The gold standard is that we will give you all of the drugs to make sure that you
have the best shot,
the best chance to put this embryo into your uterus and for it to stick. My question was that I've got proven fertility. I've carried my own children. I'd really like not to have any of those drugs if I could avoid it. But they were like, why would you jeopardize the possibility of that embryo not sticking when the amount of embryos that they had were limited as well? And so it was a real discussion, like making sure that I'm heard, they're heard. We're going by the advice from professionals. So the first cycle was a full medicated cycle.
And did you feel, because that would have been hard, you not wanting to do the medicated cycle, did you feel pressure from either the fertility clinic or your friends, or did you just, how did the process go of making sure that you did feel heard but also felt comfortable with the end result?
It was hard. I think the first time I was kind of like, I'll just do whatever. I guess in my mind I was kind of, I was naive. I didn't really know. I didn't understand that world. I didn't really understand all of the treatments that could go alongside trying to get pregnant. Went in and did the whole shebang, the whole gold standard. And we got pregnant, but ultimately miscarried after at about 7 weeks. So then went into another embryo transfer and had lots of negotiations amongst ourselves as a team, but with the fertility specialist to say, like, do we have to do that whole protocol? Is there a possibility that we just monitor my hormone levels and my lining and perhaps try something different? And so we did a partial medicated cycle.
Is this the second transfer?
Yeah.
So you miscarried the first?
Yeah.
And what was that news like, delivering that news to your friend, or even just hearing it yourself? Because had you been through a miscarriage before?
No, I hadn't actually. So it was my first miscarriage. I think it was kind of tricky because we'd seen a heartbeat, and then I'd had a few little complications after that point. So I guess, and then we were going in for the formal ultrasound at the clinic. Everybody was really, really excited because we'd seen the heartbeat maybe a week or so beforehand. So went in that scan, and the heartbeat wasn't there. It was horrible for them. Like, I was absolutely gutted for them. That's their loss. It felt, it felt like a real sadness for them, not so much for myself. And then went through a D&C soon after, and then so it was. I felt okay in myself, but hard for them.
Wow, Hayley, you are such a selfless person for recognizing really the sadness for them, of course, but also, like, to be carrying a child in your body and to have lost that child, that is for you to only think about them in that moment. A very special individual.
Yeah, I guess, like, the whole time we always knew, that anything that came from this experience was for them. Like, we never ever went in. Me and my husband didn't want any more children. So I guess anything that was ever going to come from that point was always for them. So there was never ever this real, yes, I was connected to the pregnancy and protective of the child and stuff like that. But I never ever in my mind was kind of like, oh, I can't wait to have this baby. Or, like, the psychology was always different to that of having our own child.
And was that something you and your husband personally worked on, or was it seeing a psychologist that they really helped strengthen your mindset to have that really kind of acute awareness that this baby is in your body for sure, but this baby is your friend's child?
No, I think that's just something that we had in ourselves. Yeah, and I think that we were both really firm when we went into surrogacy that we didn't want any more children. So, I think that the mindset was already there. We were, it didn't require a lot of preparation or reminding. It was just, Yeah.
What happened with the second transfer? Did you have, so you had the partial medicated experience, and then when you went to the 12-week scan this time round, it was a very different story.
Yeah. So same sort of process. Found out at the 2-week mark that we were pregnant, and then had that scan at like the 6-week mark at the clinic, and they're like, yep, you're pregnant, and everything looked really, really positive. Like hormone levels were good. My HCG levels were like increasing in good increments, and yeah, everything looked really good. And I was positively pregnant. I was quite nauseous. Yeah, just all of the early pregnancy symptoms. I
The
had all of
joys.
those. So yeah.
So you've talked about the fact that it was a great pregnancy until around the 30-week mark when you started to contract at work, because you're a midwife. So you were in a hospital, and then walk us through that. So at 30 weeks, you knew you were having contractions.
Yeah, it was surreal, actually. Like, yeah, I'm a midwife, and you would think that I would know how to recognize these things. We had a beautiful weekend. In fact, we'd had a baby shower. We all came together and celebrated the experience so far, and like it was just beautiful. My family, their family, we all came together to just celebrate what was happening and what was to come. And I went to work, and I was kind of tired and uncomfortable, and I was like, I'm just pregnant. Like, it's just getting harder, I suppose. And then I went for my tea break, and I was like, oh gosh, it's a bit painful, like period pain. And then I was like, oh no, shouldn't be happening. Shouldn't be having pain whilst I'm having these tightening. And so I sat in my tea break and just timed when that pain was happening, and it was happening every couple of minutes. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And so then I left work and went to the assessment unit, and was in premature labour. And
Wow. Wow, you were in premature labour at 30 weeks. Gosh.
Yeah. And so then I stayed in hospital, and thankfully was given medication to stop it, and it stopped. And the next day I got to go home, but then sort of 24 hours later it kicked off again. Went back to hospital, and just the same sort of treatments, and it stopped and started. And thankfully my cervix wasn't changing, it wasn't dilating, so that was a really good reassuring thing, I suppose. We were but it was just irritating. It was for me,
because they hurt.
totally. Like, I was in labour for all of these days, and I was like, I just want it to stop. And it was so stressful for everybody, really stressful for our friends, for my husband. Thankfully, my parents were here from Queensland. And so when this started happening, well, they were actually on their way back to Queensland in their caravan, and they got as far as Esperance. And I rang. My mum felt really uncomfortable leaving. She perhaps intuitively realised that something was happening. I'm not sure, but she was like, are you going to be okay? And I said, I'm going to be fine, Mum, you go. And then the next day I rang her. I was like, oh, Mum, I'm in premature labour. She's like, we're going to come back. We'll come back and we'll just stay. And they were the greatest support, because I could just know that my kids were okay when I had to be in hospital, if we had to move quickly for whatever reason. Like all of that, we were like, gosh, if we're going to have a premature baby, how does this work? Like, so it was just really stressful for us.
So your parents, when you said that you wanted to become a surrogate and then the process started, were they like you and your husband? They were totally excited, accepting, aware of what was happening. Was their mindset the same? Like, you were, of course, growing a baby, but it wasn't to be their grandchild, but it was still, their daughter going through something monumental.
I think initially mum was like, oh gosh, that's huge.
Are you sure?
Like, do you, like, you're going to give away that baby? And I was like, yeah, but it's not mine. It's not my baby that I'm giving away, it's their baby. And I think, her initial concerns, I think then were kind of, we worked through those as the time went by, and they got to know our friends more, and they got to see, who they were.
Yeah, the full context. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I guess they never expected a grandchild. They just, realized that that baby was going to our friends. And I mean, it's beautiful now. Like, we get the whole time since he's been born, like, we our relationship is so beautiful, and they'll give us updates of whatever's happening, not just with them, but their extended family. And my mum and dad are just as involved in that as we are. Like, when I get an update of something, I'll be like, "Oh, hey, mum." Like,
so you're all family now.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
That's how. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you end up birthing the baby? And did you know he was a boy?
No. They didn't want to find
that's
out.
So special.
They didn't want to find out that what the gender was, and that was beautiful. Like, we hadn't with our own children, so we got so kept contracting sort of like from 31 weeks through to about 35 weeks, and then he was breech up until 35 weeks, and I had excessive fluid as well. So when he was breech and I was contracting at home, I was like, oh my gosh, I really hope I don't break my waters. Just was lots of me in my midwife brain was catastrophizing sometimes. But stopped contracting, and then sort of at 36 weeks, I was like getting really just wanting to know when the end point was.
Absolutely.
Women do. And we opted to be induced at 38 weeks. And
was that you knowing in your body what you needed, or was that a conversation, a negotiation you had to have with your friends, or just that's you knowing your body?
It was suggested by our obstetrician, and it was something that I was happy to go ahead with. And I think, like, all of the care and recommendations during pregnancy, that it all came down to me and what I decided. But we had talked a lot about what would we do in this situation. Like, at 12 weeks, if that ultrasound and blood test shows that there's something wrong with the baby, like, what would you do? And what would we do? So we had lots of conversations around those things. Like, we were all on the same page about various things. So when that conversation came up, they were more than happy to support me in that. Yeah.
Random question, but when were you going through the private system or the public system? And was that, again, their choice, your choice?
So we had our own children through the birth centre, through a midwifery model of care, and that was really, really nice. So when we met public, and so then when we met with our friends and were talking about what we would do for pregnancy care, that's what I would have opted for. But for them, they had thought that they would have a private obstetrician and probably go through a private hospital. So we had conversations about, like, what I wanted, what they wanted, and we met in the middle and decided on a private obstetrician and birth in a public hospital.
Beautiful. So it was a happy medium.
Yeah, it felt like it. Yeah.
I guess I can understand from their point of view, having have gone what they'd gone through, just to have that continuation of care, maybe just to help their peace of mind or continuity of care. Yeah. But it's lovely that you could have met in the middle.
Yeah. And I think it felt really nice for them. Like, each time we saw the obstetrician, we would have a scan, and that's not something that I wanted for my own pregnancies, but for them it it felt really nice because they got to see their child every few weeks, and that's important too. Like they're not getting to feel their baby kick or all of those things that you're doing in preparation for the baby to arrive. They're not experiencing that every day. So to see their baby on the scan was really nice.
With everything that happened, like scans, or even when you had to do your gestational diabetes test, all of those appointments, did your friend come, or did you just say, this is what I'm doing, I'll give you the update? Or did she want to be there? How did that work? Because there is quite a lot in that 9 months going on.
Yeah, no, they both wanted to be there. Every appointment.
Oh, wow.
Every appointment they were there. And even when I went into hospital in premature labour, they were there every single time.
Wow.
Yeah, they were as
So let's get to the birth. So you've gone into labour, and then I do know that you birthed him on all fours, which I love because I had, when my midwives told me, okay, let's try and have George, my second, on all fours, I was like, oh my God. But it's such, to anyone, because my previous was on my back in stirrups, and I would go all fours in a heartbeat every time.
Yeah,
so walk us through what that was like, being on all fours, pushing out a baby with was it three of you plus your obstetrician?
Oh God, there was so many.
Who was in the room?
So my husband, the intending parents, so those two. There was actually two midwives because it was change over time, and my obstetrician. Yeah, so there was quite a few.
And that would have been so special for the medical team to have witnessed this beautiful like exchange of family.
Yeah. We had done a lot of talking about what I wanted for the birth. I was really very aware of trying to create something that didn't let all of the extra emotion kind of put me off labouring. So I was like, I don't want to have to be in my mind thinking, oh, what are they doing, or what are they seeing, or so we'd done lots of preparation about trying to respect me and me being able to go into my little cave and give birth.
And not still, you as a midwife, you as a woman.
Yeah. But still being able to allow them in to witness that without me being, embarrassed about me having no clothes on in front of my friends. I didn't care, but I didn't want to be worried about what they were thinking and they were so respectful. And they were like, whatever you want, we will do. And so the induction process, I said, like, I want to try and establish labour on my own. And so I had my waters broken, and then I went for a walk, and I was given a couple of hours to try and establish labour. And I did that. I managed to get into good active labour. And then I said to my friend, like, you guys go. I just want to be in my zone now. But we'll call you. And my husband and my midwife were like, we'll do that stuff. You just do you, and we're there to make sure everything else is arranged in the background. And
so when you say we'll call you, you mean when like active pushing starts and baby's coming? So they'll be there for the big moment, but it's that process of labouring. Yeah.
And so that didn't take long. I could sent them away. They went down, had some lunch with their family, and God, I can't imagine how that felt for them.
Oh my God, me neither.
Yeah, and
even my body's tense just listening to the story. It's like, whoa.
And then, like, only an hour later, my husband was ringing them saying, "Come back, she's wanting to push." And so they already at that time I was on all fours, so I was like in my zone, and I knew that they'd come. And my midwife said to them, "You guys just sit there and just be quiet." And they knew that that's what I wanted and what needed to happen at that time. And
I'm assuming you didn't have an epidural.
No, I didn't. I wanted one. I'd never had one. And then did the classic thing, like at transition, asked for an epidural, and my beautiful midwife, she just whispered in my ear. She said, "Hayley, you can do this. Just focus. Let's just have a baby." And they were at the time I was like, "Oh God, shut up. I just want that epidural.
God, give me the drugs."
I want all the drugs." But it was the wisest words she could have said to me in that moment, because he was born only moments later. And I'm glad I didn't have that epidural. I couldn't have sat through having an epidural. My husband knew that I really wanted birth photos. Like, I was very aware that I wouldn't see everything that was happening in the room. I would only be in my own head. And so he said he would take photos. And so he just snapped all of what was happening in the room. And that was such a beautiful thing to reflect on after. He was, born behind me. And my obstetrician held him up to his mum and dad, who were right beside me. And they were like, "Oh my God, what's a boy?"
Oh. And who cut the cord?
What's that?
Who cut the cord?
Yeah, so he came, like, they were like, "Oh my God, it's a boy." I was like, "Bring him to me. I want to see him. I want to see this baby." Like, so then they passed him through to me, and I got to hold him, and it was just beautiful. Like, I was holding him in front of me, and I was like, "Oh, what a relief."
Not on your, no skin to skin?
Not skin to skin, but just like in front of me, because my friend was right beside me. Like, she was right here, he was right there, and we were just taking all in. I was like, "Oh my God, look at you. You're absolutely perfect. You're healthy. You're here. We've made it. Like, we've done what we've set out to do." And yeah, we just enjoyed taking him in. It was also really, really important to me to ensure that I still had that beautiful oxytocin boost, to ensure that the placenta came and that I didn't bleed too much. Like, I was very aware of the risks I faced in not having skin to skin and not breastfeeding and all of those things.
Good on you.
Can we just try and have that big oxytocin boost? So we stayed there. He was probably with me for about like 5 minutes, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. His cord stopped pulsing. And like, in that moment as well, I could see him and I go, "Yeah, you look nothing like me or my husband or my children." And I knew that he wouldn't, because he wasn't genetically related to us.
Not on your DNA.
But it was just that real, "You're not mine." It doesn't feel like I need to care for you. The people who are going to care for you now are your mum and dad, and they're right here. So we clamped his cord, and his dad came over and he cut the cord, and then I passed him to his mum, and it was just like, the photos of that moment are just they really hit you in the heart. It's like, her dreams had come true. It was just magic. And so then they just sat beside me and took in their child. It was beautiful. I gave birth to the placenta, and I was like, "Sweet, I'm having a shower now."
Everyone can leave. I'll have a wine, please.
Yes. I was like, my job is done. I was just so grateful in that moment. Like, it just felt like everybody was there to support us, and everything had gone so smoothly. I didn't bleed. I gave birth to the placenta, and it was all okay. The baby was fine. He came out screaming. He's completely healthy. Everything that we wanted was right there. And I was like, "Oh, thank you. Thank you."
Wow. So in the moment of handing him to his mum, you didn't feel that instinctive maternal, there was no hesitation. It was just, you were full of excitement.
Yeah, no, it didn't actually. Like, heaps of people have said, "How did that feel?" But I guess because we had worked so hard towards
that moment.
creating a baby for his mum and dad, it didn't feel wrong. Um, that's what we had been working on for ages, months and months. And we didn't want a baby. Like, we weren't preparing to have a baby. And he was never, ever coming to our family. So the job was to have a baby for his mum and dad. And yeah, and in handing him to his mum and dad, it didn't feel wrong. And I guess he didn't look like my children either. So it didn't feel like the wrong thing to be doing. And yeah, it just all felt really quite okay. It's not to say that I didn't feel really protective. Like, absolutely. I kind of liken it to carrying this baby and absolutely being protective for him when he was in me. But there was this barrier between him and I. So it was like, yes, I'm absolutely here to protect you, but I know that you're not going to stay with me forever. Like, I'll care for you, and then your parents are going to take over. But in that
and what happened? Sorry, go on.
And then in that postpartum, like, it's really interesting to know, like, even though I wasn't caring for a baby, I was still recovering from having a baby. And like, anytime I would hear a baby cry, my heart would just pang. Like, I'd be like, oh, is the baby okay? Even though he was never in my care, I would just always be like, oh, God, I hope he's okay. And that lasted for a little while. Yeah, I must admit that. And I think, like, in the playground, when I would see mums with their fresh babies, I'd be like, oh, you've got a baby. Like, I had a baby too. But then it became this real awkwardness, like, oh, well, where's your baby? Oh, yeah, he's with his mum and dad. And I think, those conversations were hard to navigate sometimes, because sometimes you don't want to talk about it. And then other times you're like more than happy to share the story. Yeah.
And in terms of your milk production, what did you take the medication to stop the milk?
No, I was really, that was something that was really important to me too. I really felt like it was my parting gift to him. Like, I had done so much to nurture him to the point where he was born. It felt like the last thing I could do for him was to provide some breast milk. And so I expressed and gave milk to him for 3 weeks. And then after that point, it was, he just...
that is so special. So from that 3-week mark, was he fed with formula or?
Yeah. He was mixed fed from the start. So, but yeah, it felt nice for me to do that, to be able to provide breast milk. Yeah.
So what's the relationship like now? So would he be 6 or 7?
He's 7 now. Yeah.
And how do your children, do they know it? Like, obviously he's part of the family, but he's not their brother. But what's that relationship like?
I guess you could probably compare it to being a cousin, maybe.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So, like, everybody knows the story. He's had his story told to him from his birth, that I carried him because, for whatever reason, that I needed to carry him. So I've never been, his story has never been confusing to him. And that was also really important to me, that that story was really clear, and it was important to them as well. They wanted to be sure that he knew how he came to be here. And so for my kids, they always knew right through the pregnancy, like, this baby's not ours, it's our friend's baby. And so they've never been confused about that either. And I guess as time has gone on, as my children have grown and matured and learnt more about how babies are made and where babies come from and all of those things, I think we've been able to have really beautiful conversations about families are created in lots of different ways for lots of different people. And we helped our friends have a baby because they needed help. And yeah, it is what it is. If they've ever got any questions, they're just really straight up with them, and we are too.
I guess in every sense of the word, your family is such a true demonstration of it takes. I know anyone listening who wants to go down the surrogacy path I know they're going to think what I'm thinking. Where do they find a Hayley? Like, how do women get one of you? Because you're like, how does that work? Because I know from experience, friends of mine and friends of friends have gone overseas.
Yeah.
But just in general, what's the process?
There are Facebook groups online there's surrogacy communities, but there's always going to be far more people needing a surrogate than how many surrogates are available. So that's always the challenge, isn't it? That some will be successful and some will not. But I guess it's just asking around. Like, you'd be really surprised how many people sit with the idea that maybe they could if they needed to. Like, so many women would say, oh, I'd do that. If my sister needed me to do that, I'd do that. And I think it's like putting it out there to the world and just seeing what comes of it. Like, you never know what woman is sitting there going, oh, yeah, I might do that if I just knew a little bit more. Or so I guess that's a good starting point, to just ask around and see if you can find anybody who's interested. The communities on Facebook I found kind of helpful. To be surrounded by other surrogates was really such a great support for me, to just bounce things off. And the friendships I've made as a result are just really amazing, because I think it's a funny thing. Like, when his birthday comes around, when it's your own children, you have the balloons and you have the gifts and you have the birthday cake and all of these things. And when it's his birthday, it's kind of like nothing happens. Like, yes, they'll call and we'll speak, and we, celebrating from afar, going, happy birthday. But for me, I'm like, I gave birth on this day, but there's no celebration, I suppose. Like, people don't go, oh, happy birthday to you, or they don't know that that's the day that I gave birth, because I'm not celebrating a birthday of a child that's mine. So it's always a really weird day. It's a really, really special day.
Do you wish it were different? Do you wish there was more of a celebration, or it's just a weird kind of
it's just a
feeling?
Weird thing. But I guess, on his birthday, I've got a beautiful friend who also went through surrogacy, and so we celebrate together. Like,
oh, that's so nice.
We celebrate each other when we each gave
what you went through,
other people's babies, and that feels special. Because it's a weird thing. Like, you don't go around going, hey, I gave birth to somebody else's baby today. That's weird. Like, people don't know how to respond to that. So it's not something that I say. And, sometimes I'm really happy to talk about surrogacy, but other times it's like, oh, it's such a big conversation. Like, I might avoid having that conversation today.
It's not like a waiting for your coffee. How was your experience? It's it's not that.
And you don't want to seem
without,
you don't want to seem like blasé. Like, it's a big deal. So
you don't want to rush that conversation. Without sounding vulgar, obviously it comes with an expense. So the intended parent, they are responsible to pay for all of the costs and expenses through the pregnancy and through the birth. And is there anything on top of that within Australia that they're asked to cover? Is there expenses outside of that, or is it just the process itself? And then obviously the lawyers and everything in as well.
So the idea is that you're not out of pocket. So they have to pay for everything. So all of the...
Oh, you're not out of product, sorry. Yes, okay,
I'm not
surrogate.
Out of pocket.
Yeah.
So I don't have to pay for anything. But the reality is that they can't legally compensate for anything that's not pregnancy related. So, I mean,
Yeah.
they were great in that anything that I needed, they were there and would provide. And they can provide a certain amount of time off work in the postpartum. So, yeah, I had a few weeks off work, which was lovely.
That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. And I was eligible for paid parental leave through the government as well. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, the
mm,
after the birth in terms of, so you were eligible for paid parental leave. So it's recognised, surrogacy is recognised
yeah,
by the government in that respect.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Because he was legally my child until the parentage order went through the family court. So,
Is that a similar to, so he was born with your last name and then there's a legal process. Is he adopted by his intended parents?
no, it's the
No,
parentage.
okay.
It's a parentage order. So
A
with
parentage order.
with a surrogacy arrangement in place, it's a fairly straightforward process in transferring the parentage from us to them. So that's why the process to be approved for surrogacy and get that arrangement is quite lengthy, but I believe it's lengthy for a good reason. You don't want to rush these things. It requires such a lot of, I would say, emotional intelligence to go through this. It's a huge undertaking on on every person involved in that team. So you want to feel somewhat safe and protected as much as possible in the work that you do in the lead up to going through that treatment, embryo transfer and stuff, and then pregnancy and birth. So yeah.
Hayley, thank you so much for sharing your story. Honestly, you are I know everyone would tell you all the time, but you are literally the good Samaritan, the best Samaritan the world has ever seen. In theme of the first word, what is the first word you think of when you hear the term pure happiness? Like what does that mean to you, having gone through that experience?
So I guess it's heartwarming. Yeah, it's heartwarming. Yeah, it's an ongoing thing. Like every year that goes by, it just feels better and better. Just such a joy to watch them as parents and to watch him grow. Yes, beautiful, heartwarming.
It is probably the most cruel thing I can think of, thinking of a woman pining for a baby and not having that choice for whatever reason. I just can't think of anything more painful that a woman would have to endure, sometimes for a lifetime. So the fact that there are people like you and there are processes that certainly allow these things to happen in Australia or abroad is so wonderful. So again, thank you for your time. I think this episode will be so special to many people. But yeah, I'm just really, really grateful that you've chosen to be so open and vulnerable during this podcast. And thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Tori. Always happy to share a beautiful story.